The amber light fractured into a spectrum of liquid data pooling around their feet before spiraling upward. This was not a weapon cache, this was a bespoke evolution tailored to the unique frequencies they had just mastered. The crisp white fabric of BBB's robe began to breathe. The threads unspooled and rewove themselves at a subatomic level. The material retained its flawless, tailored drape, but the textile was no longer mere cotton. It became a living, reactive canvas. As his pulse settled from the internal meltdown, the stark white subtly shifted into a deep, muted charcoal, adapting to the immediate environment and his internal mood, offering absolute camouflage in danger, or vibrant, commanding tones when he needed to hold a room. Furthermore, the fabric served as an acoustic sponge. It could absorb the kinetic sound waves of any projectile or impact, converting the violent energy into a harmless, radiating warmth that simply dispersed into the air. He was virtually untouchable, wrapped in a woven shield of silence. The six-pointed star on his chest refined its glow, now serving as a localized radar for untruths, lightly vibrating whenever deception was spoken in his presence. He looked toward her. Her upgrade was equally out of this world. The midnight indigo silk she wore had fused with the ambient starlight of the matrix. When she stood still, the dress was a void, heavy and dark. But as she took a slow step forward, the fabric cascaded with microscopic silver constellations. Her cold-forged bangle had duplicated, forming a symmetrical pair of cuffs that allowed her to manipulate the friction of the space around her. With a subtle twist of her wrists, she could make the ground beneath an enemy as slick as black ice or as dense as wet cement, all while her own steps remained effortlessly grounded. They stood facing each other, a breathtaking display of elevated design and latent power. They were a perfect aesthetic contradiction that complemented each other flawlessly. He was the anchor, the baseline, the absorbent calm. She was the melody, the friction, the commanding echo. Wow! The synergy was undeniable, an otherworldly pairing that made the surrounding architecture feel insignificant. Wisdom drop. True power is not defined by the ability to destroy your environment, but by the capacity to perfectly adapt to it while remaining entirely yourself. BBB reached into the folds of his newly charcoal-hued robe and produced a fresh sage stick. He placed it between his lips. The tip ignited instantly, recognizing his intent without a spark. He took a slow draw, the aromatic smoke curling around his headband. "The grid is waiting," BBB said, his voice now layered with an even richer, deeper resonance. She offered that genuine, devastating smile, her silver constellations shifting as she turned toward the exit. "Nari. Dust off your shoulders, peeps. The bespoke armor is fitted, the dynamic duo is online, but keep your eyes peeled because the levels have just begun."
Part 16. The frequency of the pavement. Theme: the physical grid and chromatic empathy. The transition from the grand architecture of Sector 7 back to the physical pavement of his neighborhood was seamless. The ozone and ancient dust of the archive faded, replaced by the damp, heavy scent of cooling asphalt and evening dew. BBB walked with a measured, silent cadence. His new bespoke garment recognized the shift in the environment. The living textile of his robe responded to the mundane glow of the street lamps, the fibers reweaving their pigment on a subatomic level. The deep charcoal of the vault softened into a rich, matte slate. The drape remained flawless, hanging with a deliberate weight that absorbed the ambient noise of the street. He was a phantom of elegance, moving through a world of concrete and vinyl siding. We are back on the block, peeps, but the block feels different when you hold the keys to the grid. Keep the frequency high. Here comes a low-level vibration. The low-level vibration manifested as the scuffing of cheap rubber soles against the pavement. It was the neighbor. He was the classic architect of neighborhood surveillance, a man whose primary currency was the business of others. He moved with a frantic, jagged energy, wrapped in a synthetic nylon jacket that rustled sharply with every step, a harsh contrast to the silent, acoustic sponge of BBB's attire. The neighbor leaned over the low brick wall separating their properties, his eyes darting to take in BBB's immaculate presentation. "Hey B, how's it going?" the neighbor said, his words spilling out rapidly, too eager, too into the business. "You looking sharp. I hear somebody's moving in next to you. So somebody finally bought the place?" BBB stopped. He did not turn his head immediately. He allowed the kinetic, frantic energy of the neighbor's voice to hit the fabric of his robe. The textile absorbed the abrasive sound waves, converting the nosy intrusion into a faint, harmless warmth that simply dissipated into the evening air. Beneath the matte slate fabric, the six-pointed star stitched against his chest gave a singular, imperceptible pulse. The localized radar was functioning perfectly. It detected the trivial, hollow nature of the man's inquiry. BBB slowly pushed his rectangular shades down the bridge of his snout, the calm green slits of his eyes fixed on the neighbor. The red mapping in his sclera was subdued, processing the simplicity of the moment. "Evening," BBB replied. His bass-heavy voice rolled out smooth and unrushed, a velvet anchor dropping into a shallow puddle.